Hello, everyone. My name is Kwame. I currently work at ChainSafe, and yeah, my talk is going to be on game characters and assets that live forever using FIL and IPFS. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, great. Yeah, so as I was said, my name is Kwame Bryan. I currently work at ChainSafe on the gaming SDK. Before working at ChainSafe, I've had the opportunity to work with EA, Microsoft Game Studios, mostly working on like tools, and yeah, it was great. Some of the games I've worked on are Tiny Wings, Moto X Mayhem. I worked on Bejeweled. I worked on some NHL games when I was at EA. Had the opportunity to work as an instructor at Humber and George Brown, helping with curriculum and teaching courses. Joined a hackathon in 2014, and that hack was Ethereum. And so I kind of just stuck around, did some early mining and stuff like that. And my social is at Elijah Nomad on Twitter and Kwame at 6442, or you can just join the ChainSafe Discord and you'll see me hanging out there in the gaming channel. Just an quick overview of the gaming SDK. It's really just a collection of Unity prefabs that allows you to interact with all EVM compatible blockchains. Out of the box, it has standard support for ERC 20, 721, 1155. And if you're on the EVM chain, you can just deploy your contracts and just set the chain contract address, and it will function quite easily. Currently, we have support for WebGL mobile and desktop using the SDK, and has support for decentralized storage solutions with IPFS, Filecoin, ChainSafe Files, which is our in-house file storage platform. And currently, the SDK is at 1.3.1, and there's a download link if you're interested in incorporating or getting interested in making decentralized games. So to start off with the whole issue of our game assets and living forever, and this whole concept, when I was asked to do this talk, really came from looking at the Web 1 world, where the games were just basically reads. You just kind of interacted with the game. Not much basically happened. And then we came into this really cool world of the Web 2 world, where there was this interaction. We had a kind of like a client and server architecture. Our game scores would live on a database somewhere. We had leaderboards, and that was a great step in the whole evolution of the gaming ecosystem. And now we've moved into Web 3, where we are continually still having a lot of these read writes or this kind of client server, but now we have this added component where the assets or NFTs that have attributes like strength, health, different stats that are attached to it, we actually have this particular ownership to it. And this is kind of where this talk kind of is stemming from, where we now have this whole opportunity that our game assets are living on chain. They live forever. They can actually move from chain to chain, because a lot of this data that is stored for a particular asset is just basically on IPFS or some kind of other decentralized solution. So when I was looking and doing some research for this, it always brings to mind how Vitalik Buterin, when he is thinking about the horrors of centralization and having a World of Warcraft character change, or they changed it, and this whole scenario that happened to him led to him wanting to create decentralized solutions. And the best, use case, and might be being a game developer a bit biased, but the whole decentralized nature of having an asset that lives on chain, cannot be changed, is really exciting for someone like me. If we look at our current game infrastructure right now, we still have this, server-based, client server-based architecture. And if the game developers want to, shut down a game, then of course, our games are gone. But in the current infrastructure that we have now, not only are we losing the game, but we also lose the assets too. Right. And another important point to think about is that, what about the battles and the story that is behind a lot of our game characters and assets as we start off, as a level 1 and, possibly not really being good at the game. And as we kind of progress and get further, then all these things are basically being written onto the chain, where this actual game character and the game, or your interaction in the game, is actually being written on chain and has a lot of a story to it. And currently, as we're basically moving from our Web 2 game infrastructure and this whole brand new industry of Web 3 games, are we currently caught in this maybe Web 2.5 world, where we're kind of onboarding or moving from this client server infrastructure to this purely Web 3 ecosystem? And as it kind of stands right now, we are kind of in this hybrid realm where we have assets that are maybe NFTs that are living on chain, but a lot of the interaction as far as gameplay and where the game is currently stored is still on a centralized server. So we're getting closer, but we're still not to the to that glory spot. And hopefully that during this talk, some of these ideas might spark some imagination, and you'll help join us in building out these solutions. So a lot of people have heard of the blockchain trilemma, where we have security, decentralization, but in the blockchain game trilemma, we have the security component to it, we have the decentralization component to it, and then we have the speed component to it. And currently, we do have opportunities to have all three. But there's, patches, and there is, tricks and hacks that we are currently doing to get to this sweet spot. The one thing that's awesome about blockchain games, as far as the infrastructure layer of it, is that we can pick as game developers a specific chain that works for us. If a game is too slow or too expensive to do on mainnet Ethereum, then we can look at Polygon, or we could look at a different chain altogether. And once we're dealing with our assets living on the Web3 storage and IPFS world, well, we just store it there, and then we can put our games on any chain that basically solves any of these three particular problems that we have when we're developing blockchain-based games. And that's the whole beauty of the Web3 storage and IPFS world, is that if I'm storing my game content on a mix of these or a hybrid of these sources, then I can, as the game developer, can have or can find a chain that basically does this. But at the same part, there is the centralization component, where the game is actually still stored on a centralized server to this point. So as it stands, we still have this, this kind of trilemma problem, even inside the blockchain game world, and even a little bit more so because there is a lot more of a dependence for a centralized server in order to store our actual games, if it be a web-based game, and if we're looking at networking, a network-based game where you still have a server that is routing out the XY positions or XYZ positions if it's 3D. So currently, when we're looking at these different types of decentralized storage solutions, we have, of course, Web3 storage, as everybody is being introduced to here. We have NFT storage, IPFS, if you want to go like down to the nitty gritty, and of course we have ChainSafe files, which is a solution that is developed at ChainSafe Systems. Now, if we're looking at NFT storage, the name kind of says for itself. It's a great storage solution if you're working on NFTs. It has a really awesome API, but it's really just meant for working with NFTs. IPFS, if you want to really get down to the nitty gritty of it, you can go and build out your systems there. A lot of people have. There wouldn't be these things that are on top of it to make it a little bit easier if IPFS was the easiest solution to use as a developer, game developer, or just like an end user. And then you have Web3 storage, which basically is like a really great solution for working with any kind of data that you basically want to store on the decentralized web or in a decentralized way. So of course, all of these have the underlying of the interplanetary file system architecture, and there are all these subsets that make interacting with our data a lot easier. So it really comes down to what works best for you. And if you want a lot more flexibility, of course, you're going to want to choose a Web3 storage solution. Or if you're working with NFTs, you can use NFT storage. And ChainSafe Files kind of has a beauty of all of both of these, and allows you to kind of plug into S3 and all this other stuff too. So that being said, I do work on the ChainSafe Gaming SDK, and how does the whole IPFS Filecoin infrastructure get tied into what we're doing with the SDK. So we currently are working with in-game minting. A lot of this stuff is still a bit in its beta stage, but it leverages ChainSafe files in order to store our content, or store content that developers or game developers are creating for assets that are basically used inside of their games. It allows for this whole decentralization and an easier path to it. So we talk a lot about decentralization and incorporating decentralization in our games, but it's still kind of a hurdle for a lot of people to integrate with, especially for game developers. And truth be told, if you looked at my background, I come from a Web 2 based world, and I still think a lot of the times as when I'm trying to solve problems when developing Web 3 games with, of course, well, how would I do this in Web 2, and then try to find a Web 3 solution. And what we saw from a lot of the previous slide is that it gives a Web 2 developer the on-ramp. So I like to call it the 2.5 bridge to Web 3, where I can still use a lot of the ideas and the things that I've used to solve problems in Web 2 while I'm bridging to Web 3 and looking to solve all the three components of the blockchain game developers trilemma. Now, another important point here is that once we start looking at storing our game assets onto a decentralized system, we are removing that single point of failure, where the single point of failure is the actual centralized server, which stores A, the game, B, the assets, and stats and everything like that, right? Where now, as we have been moving to this Web3 world, the game itself is, of course, on a server, and that's still true to this day for any of the multiplayer stuff. But all of the game stats and the things that are tied to our characters are now living on the blockchain. Those things actually do live forever, right? And they're blockchain agnostic. And that's another thing that we talk about, at ChainSafe, is this whole concept of blockchain agnosticism, where, we might build a game for chain X or chain Y, but the game assets are, agnostic once they are living in this, IPFS Filecoin, ecosystem. And as we continually bridge this over, we'll kind of look at other areas where, this last part of this whole trilemma may be solved, but it's still kind of like, proof of concept. So a little bit some of the, architecture of how, we are using this and getting better at it with the ChainSafe Gaming SDK. So, of course, the ChainSafe Gaming SDK is Unity. So on the client side, as far as the Unity game developer is concerned, we use something called an addressable system. So in the editing part, you'll see here that we have the ChainSafe Gaming SDK. We have our build process, which is just a normal build process within Unity. And then you have, the catalog, and then you have Web3 storage, IPFS. You can add in ChainSafe files in there too. I just didn't have enough room for all of the different logos. And then you have the actual content, right? The content that is basically driving it. So there's still this part, of course, where, the server lives, but then there's this bridge to the IPFS world, where the game is on, a server, and then you have kind of like a distributed system of nodes that are handling the actual content, defining it by the CID, and then, bringing that in game. So the game itself is really small, and all the content is basically just read from the actual chain itself. Now, that being said, if you have worked with IPFS and, having large files, it can be a bit slow. So there is some forethought that you need to do as a game developer, and have some caching, and then kind of like checking like the CID and stuff like that. But this is kind of like the whole process of how the problems are being solved as far as working with these external assets that live on Web3 storage, IPFS world. So the components of decentralized storage. So we have that data CID, so that content identifier. So once we put up our data on the Web3 storage and IPFS, I'm kind of going to use these things interchangeably. That is the unique identifier to that specific content. And even if you tried to put up something else, of course, that CID would change. So you can verify the authenticity of a game character and the components that are attached to it through this particular CID. We also have the miner ID, which is a unique storage ID for the specific actual provider. And then we have the deal ID, which is the deal made with the storage provider. And kind of how like all these miners are basically, storing parts of the data. So it's kind of like distributed amongst those nodes. And once we're looking into the Web3 storage world, there's like two major components. One is where it stores across multiple file calling miners. Sorry, and then the public IPFS network, which gets us the information, allowing us to basically retrieve the data by that specific CID for whatever that asset may or may not be. Now, getting to this this part here, I'm kind of going through my slides kind of quick. We have the lib P2P, and this is for me the most important part in solving the blockchain game developers trilemma. Now, we were talking about how a lot of the game is actually stored on a server. Now, with using libp2p and this pub/sub kind of methodology, when we think of it, the current issue that we are now is that we have this kind of decentralized, game part, but it still has this centralized part isn't in it. If we start upgrading our games to be more of, say, each person who's running the game is is actually like a node on the specific network itself, then we actually solve this particular problem, meaning that there is no single point of failure as long as there's games basically running, or there's like a community that is driving the is still participating inside the game. Then our games will last forever. These game assets will basically live forever. We remove that single point of failure that I was alluding to earlier. Also, using libp2p allows each game player to contribute to the health, security, and growth of the network. So as the game grows, it gets stronger, right? Just kind of like our current infrastructure. When we think about blockchain technology, the more nodes that are out there, the healthier their network is, the more secure that it gets, and the more through output it gets, or that it has. And we believe that blockchain games should be multi-chain and have the ability to remove any single point of failure. So this is kind of like where I see the actual future of our blockchain game development infrastructure. I also see it as the way that once we start, decentralizing the actual gaming SDKs that we are building as blockchain tools developers, that we will have the ability to, of course, remove a single point of failure, and also allow for the growth and the longevity of both our games and the networks that are attached to it. And yeah, that is basically my my presentation. It was I went through it a lot quicker than I thought, but hopefully there's some questions from the audience about blockchain games and the future of where this is going and how a lot of the Web3 storage and IPFS infrastructure can contribute to this ecosystem. And thank you very much for your time.